You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another installment of the Dog Pound Podcast, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your June 23rd, 2020 edition, your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here from the Niagara region. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as this show's podcast by following at Dog Pound Podcast. Listen to us live, usually on Spreaker.com. We are offline today by searching the Armchair GM, Spreaker.com, and the free Spreaker app. As well, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram by searching the Armchair GM Sports Network. All content posted on there as well. And lastly, we're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer. So we're on many different platforms for you. Whichever one is most convenient for you to listen to us, please give us a like, subscribe, and follow us on all those platforms if you have them, as well as our brand new website, armchairgmsports.com, for all podcast articles, contributors, network sponsors. Everything is on there for you guys. All of our platforms are all posted on that website as well, so go check that out. And as always, I'm one of your hosts of the Dog Pound Podcast, Cappy. You can follow me on Twitter at Capoots13 with a Canadian Z, and I'm always joined on the Ice Dogs portion of the network by my co-host and co-owner of the Armchair GM Sports Network. He is Kyle. You can follow him on Twitter at JustKyle51. Kyle, we're about to interview the TV play-by-play announcer for the Niagara IceDogs, Mr. Steve Clark. Really excited for this, to get into this interview, and what are you looking forward to with talking with Steve and his experiences?
You know, I've been sitting here thinking, like, man, like, what are we going to talk to him about? But obviously, us being as creative as we are, we come up with the best questions here in the Dog Pound Podcast for you fans out there, and especially for you, Joey. Shout out to you, Joey Burke. And we're going to find out some more and a little bit about his career and his journey as becoming a play-by-play announcer. I remember his iconic voice from the Perlini overtime goal, still hearing it in my head to this day. So I'm interested to see where he's come from and how he's become one of the voices of the Niagara IceDogs organization.
Absolutely, and I'm sure he's got some great stories and great experiences building his way up through sports broadcasting. So really looking forward to this. Guys, let's get you to the interview with Steve Clark, the TV play-by-play host, announcer for the Niagara IceDogs. Enjoy.
Right away, picked up by Perlini. Perlini going for a skate. Angle is short. He scores! Perlini! Overtime!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special edition of the Dog Pound Podcast right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. On today's episode, we have another great interview lined up for you, as we have the play-by-play announcer for the McMaster Marauders football and basketball on TSN 1150 in Hamilton, as well as the current TV play-by-play voice of your Niagara IceDogs on your TV for 13 years and counting. Steve Clark joins us on the line. Steve, Kyle, and Brandon with you here. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on and talk with us on the show this week.
Well, I'd really appreciate both of you thinking of me. It's great to talk a little sports during a non-sports world right now.
Yeah, and it's great. We're making our rounds around the media members that cover the IceDogs. We spoke with Rod Mahood a few weeks ago, and now we got the voice on TV for the IceDogs. So very excited here for Kyle and I, who are diehard Niagara IceDog fans even before we became members of the media. So really great to have you on. And for our listeners who may not be familiar, where can they find out more about you, and where can they connect with you on social media or for your on-air appearances?
You can find me on Twitter at Steve Clark Media. Steve Clark Media. The Steve, the S, C, and the M in that are all capitalized, and that's where I like to interact with, a lot of people. That's kind of my main focus there. There's a link to my webpage in which I put, kind of what I'm up to, and right now I'm doing a summer kind of a sports show on your TV called The Stretch Pass, in which we kind of cover as many sports issues as we can, and we shoot that every couple of weeks during the summer.
Perfect. So I've definitely tuned into a couple of those shows with you and Matt Young. Guys do a great job over there, and giving us some content while sports aren't going on right now. It's definitely been a weird time in the world, but going into the interview here, Steve, what are some of your favorite sports memories growing up in Southern Ontario, and what really made you fall in love with sports? And were there any favorite sports teams or players that you idolized that played a vital role in you loving a certain sport or team?
Well, a little backstory. I was born in England and came to Canada in 1980. So, I was only 8 years old. And even at that young age in England, it was all, soccer all the time. And as soon as we got to Canada, I really, really embraced both baseball and hockey, and immediately became Blue Jays, and immediately became Maple Leaf fans. My dad was a big believer in supporting the local team as much as possible, and so I immediately gravitated to those. So trips down to Toronto to what was then Exhibition Stadium, which is Animal Field, to watch the Blue Jays, and following the Canadians. It was kind of a painful and very good, but those are the that I gravitated towards. And for whatever reason, for favorite players, the number 29 kind of comes for. My favorite Blue Jay was Jesse Barfield. He was number 29. My favorite Leafs were Felix Van Palmatier, and both of them wore 29. The only player who's my favorite, probably my favorite athlete of all time, who doesn't wear number 29, was Dan Marino, and he wore number 13.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember on Twitter you telling me that you were a Miami Dolphins fan, which was interesting. But Kyle's going to love that you love 29 for Felix Potvin. Kyle's a diehard Toronto Maple Leafs fan, so I'm sure he loves that.
And today is actually his birthday, believe it or not. So
there you go.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I still have a Felix Potvin jersey too. It doesn't fit as well as it used to, but I'm still a proud owner of a Potvin jersey.
That's
right.
awesome.
So you're a Blue Jays and Leafs fan. I'll have to look past that, Steve. I'm a Sabres and Yankees fan, so I'll try to look at that objectively.
Yeah, we're not going to get along. I feel bad for you being a Sabres fan, but as a Yankees fan, I feel little sympathy for you whatsoever. But,
luckily, I have one.
I tried to sneak in the fact that I was the Dolphins.
Yeah, luckily I've got one winning team, and you're not the first person to come on this show and rip on me about the Sabres, so that's okay.
All right, so growing up as a sports fan, you must have wanted to play sports competitively yourself. So what are some sports you maybe enjoyed playing, or maybe ones that you maybe wanted to pursue as a kid, who starts off with dreams of being like a sports hero, or before realizing that athletic dream was just going to be ending up in a men's league side?
Well, I was, being from England, soccer was number one, as I said before. So I did, played soccer, for 6 or 7 years, and actually found, believe it or not, that I enjoyed refereeing soccer more than playing. So I actually gravitated more towards being a soccer referee. I also played hockey and was an extremely mediocre house league hockey player. Who maybe scored about 4 goals in 4 years. I played a little bit of defense. I had great memories of playing hockey. I mean, we won the House League City Championship one year. I always wished, though, that I could be a goaltender, and I was never good enough to play goaltender. But I'm happy to report my daughter, who's 9, plays rep hockey, and she's a goaltender. So I have no idea where she gets that skill from, because I'm pretty sure it's not from me, because she's actually a really, really good goalie. But yeah, you're right. Like a lot of us, we grew up playing sports, hoping for that, that moment in which we were told, hey man, you're really good at this. That never really came for me, but I was always a stats guy, and I always kind of was fascinated with the broadcasting side of things anyways from a young age. So I was happy that I was able to gravitate towards that, because yeah, you're right. My talent level wasn't going to take me very far.
Well, maybe now you found your calling as a goalie coach for your daughter.
Well, I think being a goalie parent is stressful enough. Thanks very much. That's not easy. I tend to find a spot in the arena all by myself and pace a lot.
I mean, the men's league side probably happened to me for sure because I played travel goalie my entire, I guess you can call it the minor career up until high school, and then when high school football started, I kind of transitioned to that. And then I got seriously hurt one year, and that kind of put sports on hold for me. And then after high school, I just drifted to the men's league and actually became a player, believe it or not. So I went from the goalie to a player and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, well, we always liked. I ended up playing a little bit of. I called it old man softball as well. That seemed to be certainly more my pace and more my speed.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh, don't worry, we did our beer league softball too, so we feel you on that one.
Yeah.
But how did you decide to get into sports broadcasting and play-by-play? It's not an easy job, and something you really have a strong passion for, as you must live and breathe sports every day to really be loving to do it as a profession, as well as being a high school teacher. How are you able to find that healthy balance of doing both?
Yeah, you know what? It's I mean, teaching is great in which there's the flexibility of being able to pursue something like broadcasting, because the schedules are completely opposite. And I always found that even when I was playing, I was fascinated by the broadcasters as much as I was the athletes. I mean, I can remember 10, 11 years old and being in awe of Bob Cole and Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth as much as I was in terms of the players. So I always had that passion and that love for broadcasting. And I really wasn't able to pursue it until I got to university. And then when I got to McMaster, first thing I did was I walked into the campus radio station and announced my intentions. I wanted to volunteer for sports, and and then kind of work my way up through the ranks there. Started off doing some sports updates, then chipping in on the odd sports shows. And then when live sports started with, McMaster basketball, I kind of gravitated towards that. So, that kind of really gave me the opportunity to test out to see if I had any particular talent for it. And it also was, gave me the ability to stay close to a sport and, sports which I loved, and be able to pursue a different avenue in sports.
So you talk about making those volunteer opportunities for yourself and kind of trying to kick the door open yourself. If you're able to touch on it, what was your first real job in sports broadcasting and play-by-play? How did that opportunity come up for you, and what do you remember from that job, and how that job prepared you for what was to come in your career in sports play-by-play?
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm going to define as a job is the first time I actually got paid for it, because I did a lot of volunteer. I mean, campus community radio is strictly volunteer, and I wouldn't trade those experiences, for anything. I mean, we got to travel on the road. The team, flew us out when they flew. Like McMaster flew to Thunder Bay every other year. When they made the national championships, they went out to Halifax, and we got to go there. So even though I wasn't getting paid, I felt like I was doing a job. But the first time I actually got paid was when I decided to, on a whim, message a new producer at Rogers TV in York Region and say, hey, I just want to learn about TV. I'm a sports guy. Can you help me out? And he messaged me back right away and says, well, do you know anything about soccer? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, I need a color guy this Friday. And so that was basically how I got my first sports gig. Now, I didn't get paid for that, but then when that season ended, they were just starting coverage of the Newmarket Hurricanes, the Tier 2 team up there, and they wanted me to be the host first, which I thought was great. And then they go, no, you know what? We want to try you as a color commentator. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I've played house league hockey for 4 years. I'm not exactly qualified, to really give analysis, but I'll give it a try. And, kind of took the approach statistically, and that kind of became my first, paid gig. And I did that for 3 or 4 years before transitioning to fill-in work in the OHL. And when Mississauga IceDogs moved to Niagara, I was fortunate enough to apply and get that job. So certainly I went to a lot of different minor hockey arenas and high school gyms and things like that, and university gyms too on the journey.
Wow. So if you wouldn't have made that phone call, maybe you would the path that your career has taken might not have even happened if you wouldn't have made that phone call and them asking you if you were available Friday to cover soccer. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was just one of those things on a whim. It was lunchtime. I was looking around. And I thought, man, I really want to try local TV to see if I'm any good. And
Right.
just on a whim, I messaged the producer, and then you're right, the rest was history. If I hadn't made that call, then the path would have been completely different, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Sometimes it's all it takes is that domino effect.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
And sometimes you just, you never know if you don't ask. So we were in the same boat when we started as media members for the Ice Dogs. We just, sent out an email. We didn't know if we were going to get a positive response back, and we did. And like you said, the rest is history. And now we're here covering the Ice Dogs and talking to great people like you. So for anybody listening out there, to take chances. Don't be afraid to ask. What's the problem in asking? So I think that's a great lesson for you to tell our listeners here that just any opportunity or any media members out there listening or aspiring media members that it can happen. You just have to kind of push that door open and make your own opportunities when they come.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if with sports media jobs and broadcasting jobs, there's a real change going on right now, and I don't know if that change necessarily means more jobs. So I 100% agree that create your own opportunity, whether it's asking or setting up a podcast like you guys have. I mean, the podcast market is crowded, but you got to find your niche and kind of cut your teeth at trying to find what it is you love and really getting better. And you're right, you never know till you try.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So seems like you were definitely more comfortable with the play-by-play than the color, right, Steve?
Yeah, well, you know what, I realized that if I had this dream of going as far as I could, right? And I did realize in a hurry that a lot of the color commentating jobs were kind of like coaches and athletes rather than guys like me. So, I realized that if I wanted to go anywhere, it was not going to be as a color commentator. It was going to be definitely more on the play-by-play side.
Yeah, you usually see that in any pro sports is, usually the retired athlete becomes the color commentator, and somebody like yourself who went to school for it is mostly the play-by-play. And it's unfortunate because it seems like more of the retired athletes are getting the jobs over the qualified, sports broadcasting, graduates and things like that. But I think that's just the nature of sports. People want to hear they want to hear somebody like yourself, but they also want to hear some of the players who have the experience of playing the game at a high level. So unfortunately, sometimes it might not be the healthiest of balances. If we look at a panel of 5 people, maybe one person has a sports broadcasting degree.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense, right? When you're talking about analyzing the game, who brings more credibility, Steve Clark or Ray Ferraro? And I think we all know, the answer to that. It's a pretty quick and it's a pretty easy answer. I guess the one trend now, if you take a look at Toronto sports, is now the trend of using ex-athletes in talk show host roles, which is something I know probably is frustrating for sports broadcast graduates who want to get into talk sports. But, again, the nature of the beast is name recognition, kind of means something. And both of the sports stations in Toronto have adopted, the ex-hockey players. And to a credit, they're very, very good. So there's no doubting their ability. That kind of is what rules the day in media. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to take our first commercial break on the show today, and we'll come back with more of our interview with the TV play-by-play host for the Niagara IceDogs, Steve Clark. So we'll be right back here on the Dog Pound Podcast on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Nestled in the heart of beautiful Ridgeway, Ontario, the Ridge Film House offers up films celebrating diversity, integrity, and pure entertainment. Join us for a quaint movie-going experience complete with an in-house bar, luxury seating, and carefully curated films. Join us for a cinematic experience that focuses on comfort and quality. Our films are carefully selected to fit our specific mandate, screening films that the larger cineplexes won't. Each month, our 10x15 screens show you the best in independent, foreign, classic, and second-run films. The Ridge Film House is also available for private screenings, parties, and festivals. Come and discover hidden gems or rediscover the classics one more time. Located at 320 Ridge Road in Ridgeway, www.ridgefilmhouse.com, or call 289-303 8367 for availability and showtimes. The Ridge Film House, a truly unique movie-going experience. J&L Flooring is a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride in providing elite customer service and support. They are a specialty flooring and decor boutique shop with a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety and truly unique selection of products. All their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced, so you can feel great about your flooring choices. Their goal as a local business is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity, offering unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team. They connect with their customers to simplify the process to make their life easier and to make their homes beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road, Niagara Falls, or find out more at jnlflooring.com. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 905-358-3299 J&L Flooring. The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill is located on the top of Clifton Hill and just a 5-minute walk from the majestic Niagara Falls. It is conveniently nestled in the heart of the tourist district. A family-owned and operated business, the Spicy Olive opened its doors in 2003 and has since been established as an authentic and unique Italian restaurant and bar. Its rustic ambiance and time-worn finishing provide a warm and inviting dining experience. Offering an array of delicious dishes, they specialize in authentic Italian cuisine, homemade sauces, fresh ingredients, and consistently provide a strong foundation on which they build their menu. As night falls, the Spicy Olive shifts to a lively lounge where dancing, martinis, and live music come together to make a perfect evening. Let Spicy Olive host your next function, birthday, private event, bridal, or baby shower. For more than 15 years, they have served not only their dedicated locals, but customers from all over the world with authentic Italian food and only the best in live entertainment. Located at 5026 Center Street, just off the historic Clifton Hill in Niagara Falls. They're open daily at noon till 10 p.m. and till 2 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Call 905-371-2323 for reservations and special events. The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our special edition of the Dog Pound Podcast, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Cappy and Kyle back with you here, and we are joined by the play-by-play announcer for the Niagara IceDogs on your TV for 13 years and counting, Mr. Steve Clark. And continuing on with our interview with him here, and Kyle, take it away.
So we kind of learned a little bit just before the break how the IceDogs came up on your radar and the move from Mississauga to Niagara. But was being a play-by-play announcer for an OHL team something you'd ever envision as your next step in your career?
Yeah, I had started. I always thought that basketball was going to be where I landed because I did a lot of basketball. When I was at McMaster University, they didn't have a hockey team, so there was really no hockey opportunities. It wasn't until after I kind of went post-university and moved that I found the hockey opportunities. So, but, once I did a couple of fill-in play-by-play gigs at the Tier 2 level when the regular play-by-play guy wasn't there, I found that A, I really enjoyed doing it, and B, people told me I was okay. I wasn't bad at doing it. So I thought maybe there was something that I could do here. And again, right place, right time for me. I was living in Oshawa and actually got to know Roger Lajoie a little bit. He was the play-by-play voice of the Oshawa Generals at the time. And of course, he's in the Fan 590 and he lives up in, the Durham region. So he and I had lunch one time and chatted. And then when it came time when he couldn't come to a game, he asked me if I wanted to fill in. And I did. So I actually started off my OHL journey in Oshawa. I did 2 or 3 games for the Oshawa Generals. And imagine that as a young broadcaster. You're walking into the then GM Center, which is a fantastic building, and you look down on the ice, and the first game you're broadcasting involves, John Tavares. So it wasn't a bad place. Wasn't a bad place to start, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great, and we've seen what John Tavares has become today. So you kind of got to see his first kind of steps in his major hockey career. So that's actually pretty cool.
It's the best part of broadcasting, Kyle, OHL hockey, is that you do get to see these guys on their journey on the way up. And, I mean, I guess if you want to call it name dropping, or you talk about all the players that you came across and called, during my tenure with the Ice Dogs, the Alex Petrangelos, the Ryan Stromes, the Dougie Hamiltons, and people like that. I mean, that's really, part of the fun of the journey. But yeah, all of a sudden, I made sure that when I put together my first demo tape, there was a lot of John Tavares stuff on it.
I mean, I would too. You're not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice accomplishment to be, calling games with such great players, and like you mentioned, some great Ice Dogs. We have a question a little bit after about that, about some Ice Dog players that you were able to call over the years. But what were your thoughts on the team moving to Niagara? I know you're not from Niagara yourself, but did you know all these years later, after you applied for the job, you became the play-by-play announcer on TV for the Ice Dogs? Did you know that Niagara was going to be such a junior hockey hotbed? Because I think it's safe to say, as far as an OHL in-game experience and the passion, commitment that this community has for the Ice Dogs, it's mostly unmatched in the OHL, and the community aspect of it is something that's very important, as well as the organization is always giving back to the region with all the jersey auctions for charity, the community activities when they do the community skates and preseason games in other areas of the region, and the outreach that the team does for so many vulnerable people in this region. I think it's very important. And did you ever envision that when you took the job that Niagara would be as successful as they are today?
Well, I knew that, when the team moved from Mississauga to Niagara, there was a lot of trepidation about junior hockey in the Niagara region. I mean, there's a rich history of junior hockey in the Niagara region, but there's a little bit of it as kind of a scattered, inconsistent, history, and whether or not it would be successful. And plus, when they came to Niagara in 2007, the venue that they used was the old Jack Gatecliff Arena, which basically everybody knew was going to be a temporary solution. I mean, as a barn, if you're a lover of history, it was fantastic. I mean, the ice surface was small. It was an intimate, atmosphere. But I don't think the Ice Dogs survive and become, the entrenched part of the region that they are without moving to a new arena. So once the new arena was approved, I really think it cemented Niagara in that region. But what junior hockey has done in that region is been nothing short of spectacular, because it's not just, as you guys said, it's not just St. Catharines. It truly is a Niagara team from Grimsby to Port Colborne to all the other places in the Niagara region. You can find Ice Dog fans, and you're right, they'll go to those arenas as well. So that part of it has become really, really successful, and it was really smart marketing for the Ice Dogs to know that they really couldn't just draw from St. Catharines. They had to be Niagara's team and draw from all areas of the Niagara region. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it really is fantastic. The arena is beautiful. The game day atmosphere is great. It's a fantastic place to call a game from, and all the other things that the Ice Dogs do. I think it's become more of a success than they ever envisioned.
I truly believe that we have the best game day out of maybe all of the OHL teams, just based on what I've seen on streams through other games, and from what I hear, that our game day is top notch.
The atmosphere, for sure. And Steve, you bring up a good point there, not alienating certain areas of the region. We had Rod Mahood on the Niagara, obviously the host of the Niagara Sports Report and the PA announcer for the Niagara Ice Dogs, and he brought up basically the same points you did by saying that, if this was called the St. Catharines Ice Dogs or the Niagara Falls Ice Dogs, I don't think it would be as successful as just calling it Niagara and just having it a general regions team instead of, just a St. Catharines or a Niagara Falls team, because those cities, they still have rivalries with certain things, and even in Junior B hockey with the St. Catharines Falcons against the Niagara Falls Canucks, still a rivalry here. So I think you bring up a great point there that by just naming it Niagara in the general sense, it really helped grow as a whole community and brought a community together for a team.
Yeah, and I said they had to, right? It said if they'd have stayed with Jack Gatecliff, I mean, I think one of the provisions of when they moved the franchise to Niagara is that they needed to have a new arena in place, or at least, ready to pitch for a new arena, because you just weren't going to derive the revenue. You weren't going to, survive really financially in Jack Aycliffe, which was only, a 3,000 capacity, which is a little bit short of what the OHL likes. So they really had to create that buzz around the team at Jack Aycliffe to be able to, afford and to support the arena. And now you look back and you're thinking, wow, this arena is not just a hockey arena. It's basketball now, it's concerts, it's all of these things. It's really livened up, the downtown St. Catharines area, and it's brought the region together. So yeah, it really has been wonderful. And I've been to, just to touch on your other point, I've been to a lot of different arenas, just watching games, or I've filled in call games there. And I agree, the game day experience at Niagara is like no other. And the fans in Niagara are like no other. They were still putting 5,000 people in the stands, last year, when they knew the team wasn't going to be very good. And that says something.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, we remember that. I remember some, like, in the dog days this past season where we were still drawing close to 5,000. Like, oh my God, like it was just from the press box. I'm like, it's insane how we're still generating at least 5,000 fans, and truly shows the passion that the fans in the Niagara region have for this team, regardless of where they are in the standings. They're always there to show their support, which is huge. So,
and you bring up a good point, Steve, about the arena. It's funny that that arena, was plopped where it is, the Meridian Center now. I remember that was just an empty parking lot. We used to park there and walk over to the Jack for Ice Dog games back in the day. So it's pretty funny that we used to just park there and walk to Ice Dog games, and now that's where we go for Ice Dog games. So it's kind of nostalgic, and it kind of leads into Kyle's next question.
Yeah, which is the Jack itself, obviously. Look, it itself is a landmark. If you go inside, you see like the old pictures from back in the day from all the old hockey games. It's a really interesting arena. And what are some of your fondest memories of announcing back at the Jack? The fact that it's such an old rink with 2-person benches, small capacity, really brought back moments. I'm sure we all grew up in small rinks like that.
Yeah, you know what? The atmosphere was second to none in that building. And I always go back to the very first year of the playoffs there. And, the Ice Dogs beat the Mississauga St. Michael's Majors, swept them in the first round. And then the second round was against the Oshawa Generals. And that place was just absolutely hopping. And I just remember that atmosphere and how close the fans were, and how, like, you were on top of the action even as a broadcaster. If you remember the old I'm going to use the term loosely, media center at Jack Aycliffe. It was very small, and Ed Burkholder and I were basically in this tiny closet-like room, and there's pictures of us, and you can see both of us leaning out of this tiny booth because you couldn't see into the corners without leaning out. I always joke that if anybody took a picture, we looked like the two old guys from the Muppets who sat up in the area. Called it. It was a unique place to broadcast, but again, you were on top of the action, and the action moved so fast as well that it was just great to be there. And the Ice Dogs had a lot of success in that arena. I mean, teams had to adjust to basically playing, in an arena that was 10 to 20 feet, shorter and smaller than their arena. So it was the best home ice advantage that the Ice Dogs, could have. I mean, they won their first Eastern Conference championship in that arena and made their first appearance in the OHL final in that arena. So that 7-odd years they played at Jack Aycliffe, I mean, it was really, really good for the franchise, and they did have really a tremendous amount of success.
So I remember that box you're talking about, because I still play men's league hockey, and some of our games are there, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So I can only imagine what it was like having to poke your head out every time a play went into the corners.
You know what,
It
Kyle?
was intimate.
Maybe next time I go watch one of your games, I need to go and pull a Steve Clark and go sit up there and try to call the game, see what happens.
I'm pretty sure that the gum I left there might still be there.
It's funny you mentioned some of those things, because when we had Rod Mahood on, he talked about when the players would tell him that during those playoff runs that they could feel the building shaking. Some of the beer actually seeped through to their dressing room in one instance, and he also talked about when he would have to climb up the ladder to get to his spot in the press box, or in his box, I should say. Did you have to climb up any of those dangerous ladders to get to where your spot was?
Fortunately, we were blessed with stairs. Now, they were steep stairs, but they were stairs. But I remember I would go over and visit and say hello to Rod, and I'm like, man, I don't know how you do this, every single time. I've heard, horror stories. I think people I know talking to other announcers in the league that they say Sudbury has the worst steps, in the world to travel up to the media booth. But that was Jack Gaycliff. I almost feel spoiled now to go up in an elevator.
Oh yeah,
at the Meridian Center to the broadcast area. So, yeah, it was quaint. It was vintage, and if you didn't like it, it was just old.
Yeah,
but I loved it there. It was great.
Oh yeah, it was definitely that small, like Kyle said, local rink atmosphere, and it was great. But it was time to move on to the Meridian Center when they did. So. I'm glad that we when we started our media career, we didn't have to do any of the stuff that you guys did, and we got nice elevators to go up into, and we didn't have to go through any of the struggles back at the Jacks. So I feel for you guys in that sense.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's a beautiful arena, and what that Meridian Center has done is that it has now captured the casual hockey fan, and it's captured the we need an evening out in St. Catharines, so let's go to a hockey game and grab a bite to eat before the game and go watch the game. So it's not just like the hardcore diehards there. They've captured the casual fan, and they've made it like just an evening experience. And I mean, I guess especially if you're sitting in the private box, it's all the more better. But even just going to the game and sitting in the stands, it's now become like an evening out, like just going to a movie or a theater or something like that. So it's captured that casual fan, and I said once you go there, right, guys, you're hooked. You love it there, and you just want to go back again.
Oh yeah, that's a great point you bring up about the casual fans. I never thought of that, but you're absolutely correct. And those bridges to the arena are nice too, so I'll take those any day. But an interesting fact that people may not know about you, Steve, is that you spent 2 years as the Hamilton Bulldogs AHL TV play-by-play voice from 2013 to 2015. How did that opportunity come up, and how were you able to balance that with your other commitments and responsibilities with the Ice Dogs and as a teacher as well?
Well, I was fortunate that, guys, I really had a lot of support at home. My wife is very, very, supportive of me and my broadcasting career. I married a hockey fan. She was from Sarnia and grew up a Sarnia Sting fan, so she liked OHL hockey. So the fact that I was involved in it, really kind of helped in terms of me going out and calling games. When the Bulldogs opportunity came up, it was actually when Todd Crocker, the play-by-play voice, he got a full-time job with the Marlies, and I had been doing some things for Cable 14 before. So immediately my first phone call was like, hey, I'm really interested in this. Can I apply? And they said, absolutely, we'll make our decision. And when I got the gig, I found out they were only doing Friday night home games, which was helpful. So it was only like 13 or 14 games a year. And then when I talked to, my producer at Niagara, Darren Sawyer, he was very encouraging and said, if there's any sort of crossover or any sort of conflict, then, go call the AHL. We've got plenty of guys who can fill in for you. So I was lucky to have, the support and the kindness of not only at home, but also with the Your TV people to be able to do both gigs. Now, it did make for a very busy couple of years, that's for sure. When you're calling between the OHL and the AHL, I think one time I was up to 60 games that I was calling during the year, and then that made for a very, very busy existence. But it was great. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to call professional hockey and to have that on a resume and to do it from my hometown, which is actually Hamilton, was a wonderful experience for a couple of years. It was kind of sad when they moved on. And then went to, I think they went out to St. John's and then eventually to Laval, and then the Bulldogs of the OHL came in.
Yeah, the good old First Ontario Center. Kyle and I have been there for a wrestling event. We've been there for a comedy event. We have not been there for a hockey game, but
really,
yeah, we've been there for a few things that weren't hockey, but that place is interesting to get in.
Wait, I've been there for hockey.
Oh, okay, you've been there for hockey, yeah.
My dad used to get Hamilton Bulldog tickets back in the day from his sister. I guess she worked at a law firm close by, and then she used to get free tickets all the time. So we used to just pick a game and go see it. And I think the one memory I'll never forget is because I seen them on TV like a week before. It was the Marlies and the Bulldogs, and Michael Telquist, who was still on the Leafs, was starting in net for the Marlies. So as a kid, I was like, "Oh my God, it's a Leafs goalie!" And I got to sit right behind, like 2 rows behind the penalty box. So any like Marlies player that came into the penalty box, I like took a picture of the back of their jersey, and not knowing who they were, but I was just so close to like a player in the Leafs organization was just amazing.
One of the things that always plagued Hamilton was the fact that they drew really, really well when the Marlies came in, but because Hamilton was not really a Montreal Canadiens town, they really suffered for the fact that they weren't like the Leafs farm team, right?
Yeah.
So they never drew those big crowds. I mean, to be associated that they would have got had they been the Leafs, because whenever the Marlies came in, you could count on 7,000-8,000. I remember the one game I called was William Nylander's first pro game in North America, and it was down, at First Ontario Center, and I think they put 10,000 people in the building, for that. So if the Marlies came to town, it was great. If the Rockford IceHogs came to town, it was a different story, altogether.
You brought up William Nylander, but just a side question here: what were some of the notable players that you got to call during those 2 years doing the AHL play-by-play that you can remember that stick out in your mind that have gone on to have great NHL careers?
You know what? Really, it wasn't a great time for Montreal prospects, so there weren't overly, that many prospects who really went on to prominence. Or I thought there was a few guys that were going to go on to great NHL careers, that really didn't. Like a Jared Tenorti, I thought was going to be one of those big shutdown NHL defensemen, and he's still in the NHL, but not quite the career he envisioned. But, the year before I actually did the Bulldogs play-by-play, I filled in as a host. And this was actually going back a couple years before, and I got to interview PK Subban, which remains, one of the great highlights when he was down with the Hamilton Bulldogs, for a year. So that remains a highlight. But I kind of remember almost like it was the opposing team that had more prospects than the Bulldogs did. They had good players, but they never had those great NHL prospects that you kind of remember. But It was still a real fun 2 years, to call that team, and to say that you can't not too many broadcasts can say that they called AHL hockey for a couple of years. So that was a nice feather in my cap.
Other than the obvious age gap in the different leagues, what was some of the differences or uniqueness about the AHL compared to calling the OHL?
Well, the play was definitely more structured, and the play was a little bit slower. I mean, junior hockey is a very fast-paced transition game, and and it's a place where like you have young players, and young players are going to make mistakes, and those mistakes are less pronounced at the American Hockey League level. Not that they don't, happen, but I think that when you're a pro, I think you kind of carry yourself differently than when you're a junior hockey player, because if you're a junior hockey player, you have one goal, and that's to go up to the professional ranks, hopefully with the NHL being the final goal. With pro hockey, like the American Hockey League, you've got guys who know that they're not going to get back to the NHL, but they love hockey and they're the veterans. You've got the prospects who want to go to the NHL. You've also got the guys who've been up and down with the NHL. So there's more of a personality dynamic, and the roster is a lot more fluid with an American Hockey League team, and sometimes that affects kind of the quality of play, with players not being as familiar with one another, and so as a result, I think the scoring is down a little bit in the American Hockey League compared to the Ontario Hockey League. But
Right.
Those are mainly the way that the players kind of carry themselves, I would say, is the main difference between the pro ranks and the junior ranks.
Okay, that's interesting, because I obviously have not really been to any AHL games, so I just wanted to know what the difference was from somebody who's called both. And going off of that, now being with McMaster on the radio side, is there one that you would pick over the other as far as play-by-play? Like I mentioned earlier, Rod Mahood was on the show recently, and he talked about how it's excuse me, so much harder but more enjoyable to paint a picture on the radio as opposed to TV where you can see the play develop. And he said the best way to learn a sport is to listen to it on the radio. Do you echo those same thoughts as someone who's been on both sides of play-by-play on radio and TV?
Yeah, I really do. And I know for me as a play-by-play guy, it's a different call when I call a game on the radio than I do on TV for all of the reasons that Rod outlined there. The visuals are there for TV. You just have to enhance them. For radio, as I said, you paint the whole picture. You make the description, and you're more descriptive in your voice, and really you say and talk, a lot more. I guess I'm a throwback guy in that I love radio. I still love listening to live sports, on the radio. I still love calling, I would say, live sports on the radio even a little bit more than I do TV. I mean, it's just such a great visual. I mean, I know that they say that radio might be kind of fading away a little bit, and I know that there are some teams who are reducing their radio presence, but to me, there's no better way to consume a game, whether it's football, basketball, hockey, or whatever, than to do it on the radio. There's nothing like it, and my preparation is different, my call is different, how I interact with the color guy is different. It's just different, and especially when I'm calling football too. I'm generally calling the game outside, which is a whole different experience than calling the game from inside a booth. So there's that added dynamic there too. When I'm calling basketball, I'm right down courtside, normally calling basketball. So there's different dynamics and different variances from every sport. And certainly for radio, you really have to, if people don't know where the ball is or where the puck is, they're going to tune you out pretty quickly. So you have to let people know exactly what is happening at that exact time.
Mm-hmm. And it's definitely true with like having even doing so, like if it's like a television broadcast, because I remember there's one moment that always sticks out in my head, not only because he was probably my favorite Ice Dog player of all time, but there's a moment that he scored where I can still remember hearing your voice without even seeing the highlight. Was Brandon Perlini's overtime goal and then his celebration all the way down the ice. Like I can still hear your voice in my head of that goal call. So it definitely takes a special kind of person to do it, and for sure you've definitely found that groove for play-by-play broadcasting.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do on the radio. I don't know if I could do it on the radio as far as play-by-play. It really is much different, but I echo the same thoughts as you, Steve. I talked about this when we had Rod on, but I love listening to sports on the radio. I can listen to any sport on the radio. I can listen to golf on the radio if I want, or NASCAR. Like I love listening to anything on the radio as far as sports. I grew up listening to Rick Jeanneret, obviously, as a diehard Buffalo Sabres fan. I still listen to Rick Jeanneret today. Obviously, John Sterling from the Yankees, and like I said, I'll listen to any sport on the radio, football, basketball, whatever it is. I just think those guys have a very unique talent to be able to paint a picture that's not visual by the eyes for listeners to see, but you kind of paint that canvas for them, and it's definitely I love sports radio. We do a podcast here that's audio based, and I've always had a love and passion for sports on the radio, so I definitely echo your thoughts there.
I'm more tired after I call a game on the radio, just because it just seems that things move faster. You're talking faster, you're getting more words in and things like that. And boy, what a great point you make about Rick Jeanneret and John Sterling, like iconic voices that you tie your youth into, really. And now you tie the fact that you're still you're an adult and still a fan of the team, and those voices are like comfort food. They're always around. And, they're a real connection to the team.
Absolutely. Kyle with Joe Bowen too, but we don't have to mention that.
Hey man, he's an iconic voice in the Leafs organization.
I guess.
and he does radio, so you can appreciate that.
All right, fine.
So so with the Ice Dogs this past season, the 2019-2020 season behind us, what are your thoughts on this crazy roller coaster of a season as it was? I know I kind of speak for the both of us here as our first year covering Ice Dogs and media members. There was definitely a lot of interesting developments with the team, going from playoff contender to a rebuilder due to needing to restock the draft pick capital. The emotional injury to Tucker Tynan, a fan favorite like Akil Thomas's farewell after scoring that awesome golden goal for Team Canada, and his return from Peterborough, and the season being shortened due to the pandemic, with the Ice Dogs missing the playoffs for the first time since moving to Niagara. So the season has definitely had its fair share of storylines, I guess you can say. What will be your biggest takeaway from it?
Boy, yeah, you're right, though, wasn't it? It was something else. The season had so many twists and turns and different narratives. My takeaway from the season is I guess it's a positive and a negative. Before Tucker Tynan's injury, he really became that star out of nowhere that nobody expected to succeed at the level that he did, but he was able to succeed until that horrific injury. And let's hope that he's able to write another chapter in his comeback when when the OHL gets back going again. But that was a fascinating story to watch. And he really kept, the Ice Dogs afloat in the first part of the season, along with, veterans like, Phil Tomasino, the return of Ivan Lodny and Akil Thomas, and then a complete switch, when those guys got traded. And the Ice Dogs had a very, very young team. I've never in my years covering the Ice Dogs endured a losing streak like the Ice Dogs had. And it becomes a challenge really to come up with game stories and game narratives when it comes to, to calling a game when a team is struggling. I mean, you put your all into it. And we actually found that we enjoyed telling the stories of a team that is rebuilding than when a team is successful. But there were some awfully long nights at the arena when the Ice Dogs were really struggling, and you knew that they were hosting a team that there wasn't going to be a great chance that they were going to win, and there was going to be a great chance that it was going to be one-sided, and there were a lot of those types of games. But that's the cyclical nature of junior hockey, right? But the Ice Dogs had just about everything you could imagine thrown at them, and if the whole thing, the diversity makes you stronger, then this team is going to be a strong upcoming. So that's kind of what I'll remember. Just as you guys said, the twists and the turns and the roller coasters and of the season were something else, and I don't think we'll ever see that replicated ever again.
Yeah, I think the Niagara fans were a little bit spoiled. It was the first time that they had ever experienced that, as like Kyle mentioned, they had not missed the playoffs since coming to Niagara, and I definitely echo. There were some tough nights in that building. Even with the fan support and those really bad games where they were getting blown out and that long losing streak, even the post games afterwards with Coach Burke were getting kind of monotonous, and there really wasn't much that we could say or ask that was going to change anything. It was kind of not the nicest of situations. We felt bad for him having to come out after a 13 game losing streak or whatever it reached, and it was very difficult at times to, like you said, try to find content in a positive light when things were going so bad at that time.
But you know what, though? Here's the thing, and I said this on a show at the end of the season. If the season had continued, I think the Ice Dogs would have found a way to sneak into the playoffs. There's no basis on that. They were not playing very well. They'd won like one game in 17 or 18 or something. But I just felt that they would find a way to squeak into the playoffs to keep that streak alive. So, I just an odd feeling in that way, but they didn't, and they got the second pick overall and have drafted hopefully a franchise type player. Yeah,
and I do want to bring up like the Tucker Tynan part. You said like he really came out of nowhere and really shined, and he looked very good. I just remember watching him up in the press box, just going like, this kid's got all the confidence in the world, how he's playing the puck, how he challenges the shots. He rode a lot of confidence, which is huge to see in a rookie goaltender. So I was very impressed with what happened with him in the beginning, unfortunately, and what happened December was a very, very unfortunate incident. And I really hope he does bounce back, and I'm sure he will. This coming season, we'll see him continue that pace. But I really thought he was one of the shining stars for this past season in a roller coaster type of a season.
Yeah, he was. I mean, this is a guy who was a 10th round draft pick, right? And, you just didn't know what you were going to get with the Ice Dog goaltending coming into this year when you knew Stephen Dillon wasn't going to come back. So you knew it was going to be one of those transition years. And he kind of basically took the starting position away from Christian Spralia and, as you said, carried the Ice Dogs. I don't think I've seen a young goalie that unflappable Like you can usually tell when you have a nervous, young goaltender in there, but he played like a veteran beyond his years. It was, something else to watch. And I said, if you're looking for a story to root for this upcoming OHL season, then Tucker Tynen's a pretty easy story to root for because, I actually wasn't at that game in which he got injured. But just when people, the stories they told about the nature of the injury, it's something that's going to stay with people for a long time. So to see him come back and try and resume his hockey career will be, something I think people will really gravitate towards.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring up the fact that you thought the Ice Dogs were going to sneak their way in. We had GM Joey Burke on, and he said, since the season ended, our plan there was no playoffs. I guess our streak is technically still alive. So Joey is going off the basis that the playoff streak is still alive, as there were no OHL playoffs this year due to the pandemic. And it was funny because the latter half of the season obviously was down to Kingston and Niagara, and then North Bay snuck their way back in with Kingston and Niagara going on massive losing streaks, and North Bay was starting to play a little bit better. And we were joking in the press box that the Ice Dogs played in North Bay. We were supposed to play in North Bay in the last regular season game, and we were all planning on going up to North Bay for that game if it was going to be like a play-in scenario where if one of those teams won, they would get the last playoff spot. So we were all pretty fired up about that and keeping up with obviously the bottom three teams in the OHL, but one of them was going to end up making the playoffs. So it was an interesting storyline, and I really would have liked to see if that North Bay Niagara game, last game of the season, was going to be a play-in game to see who basically got in that last playoff spot and got to play against Ottawa in the first round, which obviously wouldn't have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I you know what, I was going to go to that game as well, and I probably would have, had it been a game that would have ended in determining, a play-in game between Kingston and Niagara, I would have just kept right on going to Kingston and watched Kingston and Niagara had that came to pass too. But yeah, I was going to go up to North Bay and watch that game, as well. But yeah, the end result would have been getting, I would say, fed to the Ottawa 67s.
Yeah. Oh God, they had a massive season this year, especially with Marco, them with having a huge breakout year, now being most likely going in the top 10 of the NHL draft. So huge year for them. Yeah,
and luckily the good part of that was the silver lining was that Pano Fimis is now a Niagara Ice Dog with the second overall pick, and like you mentioned, hopefully it's a franchise centerman that we can build around for the future of this team. So I guess that was the one positive through all the growing pains in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you get the second pick overall, and I know that all that talk was around, Adam Fantilli, and then when he pretty well made his intentions clear that the OHL wasn't going to be in his immediate future, then you kind of turn to other options, and Pano Fimis becomes, hey, if that's a consolation prize, that's a heck of a consolation prize to have a talented centerman like that, as you said, can really, you don't want to put too much pressure on the young man, but you can really kind of build a team kind of around him over the next couple of years and watch him grow. And, it looks to me from what everybody's told me that he's going to be a very special player. So I think the Ice Dog fans can look forward to watching this young man grow and become, as much of a favorite as, say a Phil Tomasino or an Akil Thomas.
Yeah, he was, we had a chance to interview him, and he is definitely a very, very mature young man for his age. Just the way his answers were coming across, the way he takes his game to the next level, and he idolizes his game over a guy like Jonathan Toews. So, I mean, he's stepping in some pretty big shoes when he wants to say he wants to be like a Jonathan Toews for this team and carry on that leadership for the Ice Dogs. So I think we have a gem in Pano Fimis for sure.
Yeah, and that's what you want, right? You want to see how a guy, operates and interacts with the media and how he carries himself away from the ice. The talent is going to be there on the ice, but the one thing that impressed me, to go back to the examples that I used, before with Akil Thomas and Phil Tomasino, especially with Akil Thomas, is how articulate and mature these guys, came across when they talked to the media and dealt with fans and all those things. They really, I guess the phrase is, they really got it in terms of, being an outstanding talent at the OHL level. I mean, the Ice Dogs have had a ton of guys like that, like the Dougie Hamiltons and Alex Petrangelos and Ryan Stromes, all carried themselves in a mature manner and like professionals, even when they were 16, 17 years old. So to see that with Pano Fimis, I think will bode well for his on and off ice future.
Yep, hopefully he can fit in and be just like some of those players that you mentioned. And that segues into my last question for you here, Steve. Who are some of your favorite players to watch and cover over the many years of Ice Dogs hockey here in Niagara? If you're even able to narrow it down to so many great players that have come through this franchise. For us, I know Kyle's favorite players, Brendan Perlini, talked about your call on his overtime goal in the playoffs. For myself, it's Alex Pietrangelo. I have a game-used practice jersey from Alex Pietrangelo and was obviously cheering for him to win the cup with St. Louis, so I got a framed picture of Pietrangelo with the cup up in my room, since I'll never be able to have one of any Sabres player holding the cup, so I had to have something in there with somebody holding the cup. So how great and proud does it make you feel when our own players who started their pro career or started their junior hockey careers here in Niagara and gone on to play pro hockey, and some players that you've able to get to know and call their games and really watch them grow up and go do great things in the NHL?
That's a great question. And excuse me, I'm with you guys. Alex Pietrangelo was a favorite of mine. I love Brendan Perlini's game when he played. He was such a guy who looked like a pro. He had a pro's body with that size. He had the pro shot. And I still think there's a couple more chapters for him to write in his NHL career now that he's with Detroit. I was a big Ryan Strome fan as well. I just fascinated by his talent and his creativity. My two favorites, though, and they're two guys who NHL career, never panned out the way that they wanted to. And again, I go back to my strange fascination with the number 29, and Mark Byzantine is the one guy that comes to mind for me. And I think partly, not just because of the number 29, I think partly is because his hometown is Waterdown, which is where I live, which is a small town. And it's his family actually lived around the corner. We used to run into his mom when we used to go out for a walk on the street. So there's that. And a guy who, first round draft pick of the Coyotes. It looked like he had it all, but then injuries just kind of derailed his career, and he becomes one of those hockey players that played one NHL game and then retired. But I always really just liked how Mark Byzantine carried himself, and I always felt that he really had to carry the unfair burden of that Team Canada loss to Russia, in which they lost the 3-0 lead in the third period, and Byzantine was in net for all 5 goals. I really felt that he got unfairly, tormented with that moment, and I felt bad for him for that, because obviously that's a team loss. The other guy, and he's always going to be my favorite player, and I always said, who's the most talented guy you've seen in an Ice Dog uniform? I always say it's Josh Hosang. And I was just mesmerized by watching him play when he was on. And that Josh had some consistency issues. He had some issues with the 200-foot game. But when he was on, his skating, his stick handling, his creativity was at a level I've never, ever seen. And it hasn't translated consistently into the NHL yet. And I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity. But he was always a guy who I was just fascinated by watching. But the Ice Dogs have been lucky. They've had so many first-round picks go through, their system, from the Brendan Perlinis to the Ryan Stromes to the Dougie Hamiltons, et cetera, that it's hard to pick, sort of a favorite. But those are the guys that I really gravitated towards.
Yeah. I think Ryan Strome is the one player that's really breaking. I think even Dougie as well, but with his new team. But Ryan on the Rangers has definitely looked like he's found his spot, that he's going to be able to take his career to another level right now. Just from seeing this past season with him on the Rangers, I'm like, oh God, he's building some big chemistry with that rebuilding team. So he could be a huge part of that organization if he continues.
Yeah, I'm so happy for his success, because it looked like, his career was on the downside when he, struggled the latter part of his Islander tenure, and then really struggled when he went to Edmonton. So I'm really glad that he's found success in New York. I mean, that it's wonderful to see. You almost forget that he's still only 25 or 26 years old, because he's around for so long. So I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, and he gets to play in MSG of all places as his home rink. So I mean, that's big enough as itself. Yeah. My dad's a Rangers fan, so he can attest to that.
And Steve, it's funny you mentioned Mark Byzantine. Were you? I'm sorry, I didn't see if you were on the call for that. But what were your thoughts on him scoring that goal? All those years ago.
I wanted to call it. I so badly wanted to be the one who called it, because you knew that year that he wanted to score a goal, and you knew pretty well that he'd been given specific instructions as to when to try for a goal, like make sure that there's at least a 2-goal lead with the net empty and all that kind of stuff. And the first thing I thought was I was so happy for him, and the second thing I thought was, selfishly, I really wanted to call that goal. And but what a moment for him. He was such a good puck handling goaltender that you knew that he would try to do it, and when he did it, that was and it was in a playoff game too, right, guys? I think it was in a playoff game that he did it too.
Yeah,
so even better.
And maybe you should have gone on the walk to see his mom and asked for the puck from that game. As a big Mark Byzantine fan.
Actually, I'll go. When I'm done here, I'll go knock on the door now and see if she's home.
Yeah, get that puck. Big fan. But
I don't think he's going to give it up.
Probably not. Steve, before we wrap up today, do you have any questions for us? Maybe, turn the tables on us as a play-by-play host yourself if there's anything you want to ask us.
You know what? I've never been asked that question when I've come on, and you've kind of caught me a little bit flat-footed. But
pro wrestling related, maybe?
Here's my question for you is, okay, and then I have two because you bring up wrestling. I said, favorite wrestler or favorite match of all time for both of you? And my second question is, with the podcast being so crowded and so many people doing a podcast, how are you going to separate yourself from the pack? There, how's that?
Oh,
that's a great question.
That's a great question.
I will start with the easy one first, wrestling. How about that? So, Brain, I'll let you go first.
My favorite pro wrestler of all time or current?
Either or.
My favorite all time, and it's pretty odd one, but I always loved his craft in the ring and how good of a character he was, all the different roles he played. I was a big William Regal fan for the way that and the great things that he's doing with NXT now as as developing the talent and being the general manager. But even back in his day as the commissioner and being a great in-ring technician, I always loved William Regal. He was always one of my favorites. And as far as now, I'm currently a big fan of the women's division. And my favorites are obviously Trish Stratus, being a great Canadian, was always my favorite women's wrestler of all time. So she's got a spot on my wall of when I met her and signed action figure and all that. I'm a big kind of guy for getting to meet my favorite wrestlers. And obviously now, currently, I'd probably have to say AJ Styles or Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss would be my favorites currently. But again, I'm not really keeping up with it as much the last couple of years, kind of falling out with it, but still like to keep up with my favorites and still love like yourself to go back and watch old wrestling clips because miss the old glory days. But that would be my answer for you, Steve. Kyle, what about you?
Me. So when I first started watching wrestling ever when I was younger, the first match I seen was an Inferno match. I guess for wrestlers that are people that don't know what that is, it's when the ring is surrounded by fire. Believe it or not, and it was between Kane and the Undertaker, and Undertaker is actually my favorite wrestler of all time, and probably the greatest wrestling character of all time. As now he just recently hung up the boots after a 30+ year career. My favorite match with him was at WrestleMania 25 against Shawn Michaels, which is to this day still touted as probably the greatest WrestleMania match and even top wrestling match of all time in any league or any company. So that for sure would be my answer for that.
I'm sorry, before I let you guys wrap up here, I'm a big Shawn Michaels fan, always have been. So that match as well, you're right. It was amazing. It was a perfectly told story. Those guys, I don't think either one of them could top that level of match. So being a Shawn Michaels guy, then I'm right with you with that one.
Mm-hmm, yeah, Mr. WrestleMania, that definitely was probably his top WrestleMania match, probably alongside him. I know he really, from an interview, I know he really loved the Ric Flair match where he retired him, and that meant a lot to him, being the person to kind of have his last wrestling match with. So I know that the Undertaker one's definitely in his top itself.
Mm-hmm.
If your boy Matt Young was on the show, Steve, I bet he'd probably say Hulk Hogan or somebody like that. He's always under those, always trying to talk about Hulk Hogan in the press box, it seems like, and joking about those old wrestling moments. But that second question, that's a hard hitting question, Steve. I don't know if I have enough time on the show to answer that.
I think one point we could make from that question is that we try to capitalize on our region first. Obviously, we're not going to try to target the North American platform or the world platform, but the Niagara region itself, there's not really many Niagara region based podcasts out there from my knowledge, and I think we could definitely hit a market in there if we could strike with our region when it comes to sports, and especially with the Ice Dogs. Like I don't think there is an Ice Dogs podcast out there. I know there are radio shows and post games and all that, but I don't think there's actually like a fan podcast out there. So I think that's one of the things we're looking at trying to do with this network itself, and especially the Dog Pound podcast.
Mm-hmm. Definitely trying to capture the Niagara region and things that matter most to people in Niagara. So we're talking about the Ice Dogs, we're talking about the Leafs, we're talking about the Sabres, and then also giving general thoughts on the NFL and other sports as well, just to kind of keep the Niagara sports fans informed, because there really isn't a everyday platform for Niagara sports. The TSN and Sportsnet are based in Toronto and even in Western New York. There's a lot over there as well, but really capturing the Niagara region is our goal with our sports network, and something that we really want to strive for, to do something special here in Niagara and just bring the community together for sports.
Well, as I said, it was a pleasure, for you guys, and thank you for asking me to come on too. And a very enjoyable hour talking a lot of, different hockey, and even squeezing a little wrestling talk in there. I can't think of a better way to spend an hour.
Exactly, and you took it right out of my mouth, Steve. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on and share your experiences of your sports media and broadcasting career, as well as your insight and knowledge on our beloved Ice Dogs and your journey in sports broadcasting. I know I speak for Kyle and myself when I say that this has been a great learning experience for us, and learning from somebody like you who has so much knowledge and experience in this field for us as aspiring media members. It's been great, and thanks so much, and hopefully we'll see you down at the Meridian Center for Ice Dogs hockey sometime soon when it's safe. So stay healthy, and again, big thank you, and hope to have you back on the show in the future to talk more optimism with the exciting young team in Niagara, and maybe more wrestling talk. Who knows?
Perfect, Kyle, Brandon. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And as I said, you echo what I say. Let's get back to the Meridian Center healthy, and let's get into some hockey when we're allowed to do so. I think it'll be a very special year.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There is our interview with the TV play-by-play announcer for your Niagara Ice Dogs, Mr. Steve Clark. Wow, Kyle gave us an hour of his time, some really good insight and really good lessons that he taught us about just growing up and getting into sports broadcasting in his sports media career, and just why he loves sports so much. It was really a great conversation, and he definitely loves talking about sports, as we got to listen to, and hopefully you fans really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, he's. I definitely love the history that he's had with this organization. Even before that, in that one moment where it took one domino, and that's all it took to everything to fall into place. And then just goes to show you that could happen to about anybody in life. And then even his story about the Jack and him being in that tight box and having to peek over into the corners is just. All these nostalgia stories are fantastic to listen to, and I'm glad we got to know a little bit more about Steve, and can't wait to see you, Steve, now at the Meridian Center in the future when it's all safe and we're all ready to get back there.
Absolutely. More pro wrestling talk, I'm sure, is on the way with Steve. As we could probably have a whole
pro
podcast.
Wrestling show on this network. We're probably going to get one soon.
We need one. If all these other Ice Dog, Rod Mahood and Steve Clark, they all love wrestling, so I'm sure we could have enough content for you guys. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for this very special edition of the Dog Pound Podcast, with our interview with TV play-by-play announcer for the Niagara Ice Dogs, Steve Clark. We are your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here from the Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the Dog Pound Podcast, Cappy. You can follow me on Twitter at Capoot13 or the Canadian Zed, as well as you can follow my co-host Kyle at just Kyle51 for some biased Toronto Maple Leaf tweets.
Damn right.
A big thank you to all of our great sponsors who help put us on and support the network, keep the show on the air, especially during this global pandemic that's going on. Really appreciate it. And finally, to you viewers out there for tuning in and listening along with us for this episode. Hope you fans really enjoyed this and got a lot out of this, and listening to Steve and his experiences and his knowledge of the Niagara IceDogs and sports broadcasting in general was incredible. So hopefully you stayed for this whole episode and really enjoyed it. And this has been the Dog Pound Podcast on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans, for sports fans. Go Dogs go, bark, 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 and we'll see you next time.
Bye.